Hello learners, I am Dr. Sukanya, an academic consultant in the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, IGNOU. I welcome you all to today's lecture on Nastika Darshan, Carvaka, Buddhism and Jainism. You can see this chart where the division of Astika and Nastika tradition is given that Indian philosophy is divided between Astika Darshan and Nastika Darshan. Indian philosophy, I just said, is categorized as in Nastika versus Astika. So 6 Astika schools are Nyaya, Vaisheshik, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa and Vedanta. And the major Nastika schools are Charvak, Buddhism and Jainism. They have a rich culture of debate, dialogue and criticism. Indian philosophy is highly pluralistic, and Nastika schools stood apart from the mainstream Vedic traditions as they rejected the authorities of the Vedas. But they were equally rigorous. They shaped the logic, ethics, and metaphysics in ancient India. As you can see again in this chart, it's given. So now what we understand by Nastika, it is basically, non-believer or heterodox, those who reject the authority of the Vedas. So Nastika, those who do not have any astha in the authorities of the Vedas. It is in contrast with the Astika, those who accept the authorities of the Vedas. So they reject also, apart from the Vedas, the soul or the God. Thus, Nastika schools doesn't simply mean atheistic, it refers more broadly to schools that don't accept Vedic authority, that includes those that question or deny concepts like the soul, divine creation, and the ritualistic obligation. With this, we come to the common themes in Nastik schools. So we know as of now that they reject all Vedas. They have an emphasis on the empirical evidence and also rational inquiry. So they also have varied views on soul, karma and liberation. And ethical conduct is often central to, especially to Jainism and Buddhism. So despite their differences, Nastik schools share a spirit of inquiry. They often prioritize perception, reason and ethics over ritual or dogma. We'll see this unfold differently in each tradition in the coming slides. So now we come to Charvak philosophy. Charvak or Lokayat is one of the earliest materialist school in Indian philosophy. Ironically, we know most of what we do about them from critiques by other schools, for example, by Vedanta and Nyaya. The terms Lokayat and Charvak have historically been used to denote the philosophical school of Indian materialism. Literally, Lokayat means philosophy of the people. The Lokayat adopted its hedonistic values during the development of Brahmanical systems of philosophy around thousands CE as a reaction against the ascetic and meditative practices of the religious devout. Indian materialism celebrated the pleasure of the body. People began gratifying their senses with no restraint. Pleasure was asserted as the highest good and, according to the Lokayat, was the only reasonable way to enjoy one's life. Some scholarship suggests that during this stage of its development, Indian materialism began to be referred as Charvak in addition to the Lokayat. This is contrary to the more popular view that the school was named Charvak after its historical founder helped to establish the Lokayat as a legitimate philosophy. The term Charvak literally means entertaining speech and is derived from the term charv, which means to chew or grind with one's teeth. It is possible that Carvaka himself acquired the name due to his association with Indian materialism, which then led to the school acquiring the name as well. This is one of the many areas of history of Indian materialism that remains open to debate, and there is no consensus about this. Now we come to the epistemology. The Lokayat or Charvaka school recognized perception, pratyaksh, alone as the reliable source of knowledge. They therefore rejected two commonly held pramanas, inference or anumana, and testimony or shabda. Because of its outright rejection of such commonly held sources of knowledge, the Lokayat was not taken seriously as a school of philosophy. The common view was that Charvaka merely rejected truth claims and forwarded none of their own. To be a mere skeptic during the time amounted to be very low philosophical nature. To be a mere skeptic during the time amounted to very low philosophical status. The Charvaka denied philosophical claims that could not be verified through direct experience because they only believed in the authority of Pratyaksha. They only believed Pratyaksha as the pramana or the source of valid knowledge. Thus, Lokayat denied the validity of inferences that were made based upon the truth claims that were not empirically verifiable. With this, we come to the ethics of Charvaka. Charvaka ethics was pragmatic. Do what brings pleasure and minimizes pain, but that doesn't mean total chaos. Social harmony was still valued, just without religious justification. Their ethics was in conformity with their metaphysical theories, as we see in most of the Indian systems of philosophy. Existence in this body is bound up with pleasure as well as pain. We can only try to minimize pain and enjoy as much as pleasure we can. A good action leads to pleasure and a bad action brings about pain. Thus, Charvak philosophy is hedonistic, or pleasure is the highest goal for them. Out of the four Purusharthas, that is Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha, Charvaka rejects the last two, Dharma and Moksha, because liberation in the sense of destruction of all suffering can be obtained, which only mean death, and no wise human would willingly work for that end. Now we come to the metaphysical views of the Charvaka. So they did not believe in any soul or God, or they believe that, unlike other schools, that the world is made of only four elements. So first is, the world is made of four elements. Most of the Indian thinkers hold that the world is made up of five elements, or the Panchabhutas, namely Akash, ether, Vayu, air, Agni, fire, up, water, and Kshiti, earth. But Charvak rejected Akash, ether, because its existence cannot be perceived. It has to be inferred, it has to be inferred. Non-living material objects as well as living organisms are composed of these four elements. Then he claims that there is no soul. The Charvakas admit that the existence of consciousness is proved by perception, but they deny that consciousness is the quality of any unperceived non-material or spiritual entity. So for them, consciousness is there, but it is not something immaterial. There is no soul. It is something material. It is made of matter. As consciousness is perceived to exist in the perceptible living body composed of the material elements, it must be a quality of this body itself. What people mean by a soul is nothing more than this conscious living body. Chaitanya Vishishta Deh Eva Atma. This is the definition given by the Charvaka. Chaitanya Vishishta is Deh Eva Atma. So, the body qualified by the Chaitanya is only Atma. So, the non-material soul is never perceived by the Charvakas. Consciousness is an epiphenomenon or byproduct of the matter. There is no evidence of its existence independent of the body. Thus, all questions of life after death, rebirth, and enjoying the fruits of one's action in the heaven or hell becomes meaningless. There is no God. According to Charvak, God does not exist because God cannot be perceived. The material elements produce the world, and the supposition of a creator is unnecessary. It can be asked, can the material element give rise to this world all by themselves without any creator? Is it possible? Charvaka replies to this by saying that all the material elements have a fixed nature or swabhava of themselves. It is by their swabhava and laws inherent in them they combine together to form this world. Therefore, there is no necessity for God or a creator. Thus, Charvaka school of philosophy is materialist in nature. It believes that only perception is the valid source of knowledge. The epistemology of Charvaka schools leads to metaphysical theories that there is no soul or God. The ultimate goal of life for this school is pleasure, which makes it a hedonistic philosophy. With this, we come to Buddhism. So, Buddhism began as a reform movement against the rigid Vedic rituals and social hierarchy. The Buddha offered a practical path to end suffering through inner transformation. The core concepts in Buddhism include the Four Noble Truths, or the Chatvari Arya Satyani, Noble Eightfold Path, or the Ashtangic Marg, the theory of no soul, or Anatta Anatman, and the theory of impermanence, or Anicca, theory of dependent origination, or Pratitya Samutpad. And the primary sources of the core concepts, or the main concepts of the Buddhism, are Vinay Pitak, Sutta Pitak, and Abhidhamma Pitak. The Four Noble Truths are at the center of Buddhist philosophy. The goal is not faith, but the realization that suffering has causes. The goal is not faith, but the realization that suffering has causes and can be overcome through right living and insight. Four Noble Truths. Life is full of suffering, or dukkha, is the first noble truth. According to the first noble truth, all forms of existence are subject to suffering. For Buddha, it is a universal truth. All known and unknown facts and forms of life are associated with suffering. Birth, sickness, old age, death, anxiety, desire, and despair, all such happenings and feelings are based on suffering. Second truth is suffering has a cause, or dukkha samudaya. Everything is in this cosmos has a cause, and nothing exists and happens without a cause. If this is the case, suffering should also have a cause. Buddhism explains suffering through a chain of 12 links or 12 causal links and effects, commonly known as the doctrine of dependent origination, pratitya samutpad. The third noble truth is cessation of suffering or dukkha nirodha. If suffering has a cause, the seeker has to destroy this cause to remove suffering. So the desire has to be extinguished to stop suffering. Nirvana is the state of being without suffering. So when you are free of any kind of suffering or all suffering, you attain the state of nirvana or nirvanahood. It is a state of supreme happiness and bliss. The fourth noble truth is the ways to destroy suffering or dukkha nirodha marg. The ways to destroy suffering consist of the practice of eightfold virtue such as right view, right aspiration, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right awareness, and right concentration. In the practice of all these virtues, one has to avoid extremes and follow the middle path or the madhyam path. Momentariness or Kshanikvad is another important core concept in the Buddhist philosophy. According to Kshanikvad, everything is momentary, relative, conditional, and dependent. It is also known as the doctrine of impermanence or Anityavad. Buddhism teaches that the world and its objects are not permanent but momentary. The universe is a constant chain of change. The basis of the doctrine of momentariness is the doctrine of the dependent origination. According to this doctrine, every object comes into existence from an antecedent condition and gives rise to a consequent object, or pratitya samutpadvad. It is comparable to the flame of a lamp, where the flame is merely continuity of successive flames. As a flame exists only for a moment, but it gives rise to the next flame. Now we come to the doctrine of anatman or anatta. The doctrine of non-soul, anatta, is another important philosophical notion of Buddhism, which is a consequence of the doctrine of dependent origination. There is a belief in almost all the cultures and religions that there exists in man an eternal and permanent entity, variously known as the soul, the self, or the spirit. According to Buddhism, one cannot become aware of an unchanging entity called soul, and all one can become. According to Buddhism, one cannot become aware of an unchanging entity called soul, and all one can become aware of when one thinks of oneself or soul is a sensation, an impression, a perception, an image, a feeling, or an impulse. The Buddha analyzes man into five groups, or a human person into five groups, that is skandhas or the panchaskandhas, namely form, matter, feeling, pleasant and unpleasant and neutral, perceptions, sight, smell, etc., impulses, hate, greed, etc., and consciousness. Anything a man thinks he is or he has falls under one of these groups. The self or soul is simply an abbreviation for all the aggregate of these khandhas, and not some entity over and above the aggregate. Thus, there is no distinct substance known as the self or the soul. With this, we come to Shunyata. So, Shunyata is basically about emptiness, that the objects are devoid of any intrinsic essence, or that they are swabhav shunya, that there is no inherent essence in the things themselves. So, this is central to the Mahayana thought, specifically to the Nagarjuna school, and his school is also named as the Shunyavadin school. Buddhism challenges the ideas of an eternal soul. Buddhism challenges the idea of an eternal soul. The self is seen as a process, not a substance. In Mahayana, this insight deepens into shunyata, emptiness of inherent existence. With this, we come to ethics and soteriology. Buddhist ethics aim to reduce harm and cultivate awareness. Karma works as a natural law of cause and effect, and nirvana is freedom, which is not heaven but release from the cyclic existence or the cycle of birth and death. It is the stage of cessation of all becoming. It is the true state of all things in the universe, freedom from bondage and the final release from suffering. Buddhist philosophers were highly analytical, and Nagarjuna challenged fixed views while Dignaga established a foundation for epistemological inquiry that influenced even non-Buddhist scholars. Buddhist epistemology accepted only two pramanas, namely pratyaksha or perception and anumana or inference. Dignaga and Dharmakirti contributed significantly to the epistemology and logic. The Dignaga's major work was Praman Samuchaya or Compendium of Valid Cognition. He was the founder of Buddhist epistemological tradition. He synthesized logic and prepared and perception into a coherent system. Dignaga was the founder of Buddhist epistemological tradition since he synthesized logic and perception into a coherent system. Dharmakirti's major work was Praman Vartika, which was a sub-commentary on Dignaga's Praman Samuchaya. He developed Dignaga's ideas into a more systematic and metaphysical framework, emphasizing yogic perception and pragmatic truth. With this, we come to Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka, emptiness and the two truths. As we already talked about Shunyata a little, so now Shunyata or emptiness in Nagarjuna's thought does not mean non-existence. Rather, it refers to the absence of intrinsic nature or Swabhav. The idea that things do not exist independently on their own. Two truths or the Satyadvaya. Nagarjuna distinguishes between two levels of truth. First is conventional truth or the Samvriti Satya. This refers to the everyday practical truth, how the world appears to us and how we function in it. Language, social conventions, cause and effect, moral responsibility all operate at this level or the Samvriti Satya level. The other one is the ultimate truth or the Paramartha Satya. This is the truth, realized true, insights into emptiness. Ultimately, all phenomena are empty of intrinsic existence. That is, Paramartha Satya is when you realize that all things, all objects are devoid of any inherent nature of their own. With this, we come to Jainism. Jainism is one of the oldest Nastika traditions rooted in the teachings of Mahavira. It emphasizes spiritual liberation through disciplined living and non-violence. The word Jainism is derived from Jina, which means conqueror, that is, one who has conquered his passions and desires. In all probability, Jainism arose in the later Vedic period and it was revived by Vardhaman, also known as the Mahavir or the great spiritual hero in the 6th century BC. Vardhaman was the last in a series of prophets or Tirthankars. According to tradition, 23 prophets or Tirthankars preceded him. Vardhamana was the 24th Tirthankar. Jaina tradition ascribes the origin of the system to Rishabdev, who was the first Tirthankar of Jainism. Core beliefs of Jainism include Anekantavada or Parigraha, Syadvad, and the dual reality. Jainas see this world as composed of soul and non-soul substance. Every soul is bound by karma but capable of liberation. There is no place for a creator deity and reality is self-regulating. With this, we come to the metaphysics of Jainism. So for them, reality is dual, which is divided into Jiva, soul, and Ajiva, non-soul. So Jiva is the soul or conscious substance. It is eternal, sentient, capable of perception and liberation. Each living being possesses a Jiva. Knowledge, Gyan, perception, Darshan, bliss, Sukh, and energy or Virya are the qualities of the Jiva. The non-sentient substance is known as Ajiva. It includes Pudgala, matter, Dharm, principle of motion, Adharm, principle of rest, Akash, space, and Kal, time. Karma is a fine form of matter, Pudgala, that binds to the soul. It is invisible and subtle, yet material or Dravya, and affects the soul's qualities. The bondage of karma explains why soul experience birth, death, pleasure, pain, and ignorance. Unlike other systems, Jainas see karma as a real substance. When we act, it literally sticks to the soul, and only through purification one can get liberation or attain liberation or moksha. Liberation can be achieved by eliminating all karma, be it good karma or bad karma. A liberated soul or a siddha is free from the cycle of birth and death. Jainism presents a dualistic perspective, distinguishing between matter and soul as fundamentally different substances. It is often regarded as atheistic due to its rejection of a creator god who oversees the universe. Rather, Jain philosophy teaches that the universe itself is eternal, with both matter and souls being uncreated entities. In this framework, God exists within the universe and can be venerated, but they do not have any control over it. They too are bound by the laws of karma and reincarnation, just like the humans. Souls accumulate karma through their actions, which influences their subsequent lives after death. Jaina believe that every soul has experienced countless previous lives and liberation from the cycle of rebirth can be attained by shedding all karma, whether positive or negative. This understanding encourages personal growth and ethical living as individuals work toward purifying their souls and achieving ultimate freedom. With this, we come to Anekantvad or the doctrine of many-sidedness. It is the metaphysical theory of Jainism. According to this, reality is complex and multifaceted, and there is no single viewpoint that can capture the reality completely. Truths can be approached from different angles, all of which may be partially true. This promotes intellectual humility and tolerance of other views. For example, a pot exists from the standpoint of substance, it is existent. It does not exist when it is broken. Both exist and does not exist from different contexts. With this, we come to the epistemology of Jainism. Syadvad is this epistemological theory or the epistemological doctrine of Jainism. It is a doctrine of conditional predication. It is a method to express anekantavad in language. So, Syadvad and Anekantvad can set to be two sides of the same coin. One is the metaphysical side, another one is the epistemological side. In Syadvad, each statement is prefixed with Syad or perhaps in a certain respect. There are 7 conditional viewpoints or saptabhangi, allowing a thing to be described in multiple non-contradictory ways. For example, a jar, Syad asti, in some sense it exists. Syad nasti, in some sense it does not exist. Syad asti nasti, in some sense it exists and does not exist. Syad avaktavyam, in some sense it is inexpressible. Syad asti avaktavyam, it exists and it is inexpressible. Syad nasti avaktavyam, it does not exist and is inexpressible. Syad asti nasti avaktavyam, it exists, does not exist and is inexpressible. So Jain epistemology is famously pluralistic. Truth can be seen as multifaceted, and Syadvad teaches the most statements are only partially true depending on the perspective. With this, we come to the Jaina ethics. For Jaina, ethical conduct is essential to spiritual progress. Non-violence or ahimsa is central that even microscopic life is respected. Monks in the Jaina tradition practice extreme self-discipline. Now we will talk about 5 great vows or the anuvratas of the Jaina tradition. First anuvrata is non-violence or ahimsa. Avoid intentional harm to any living being, especially those with more senses. Lay people avoid killing animals, insects, etc. as much as possible. Second anuvrata is truthfulness or satya. Speak truth kindly and responsibly. Refrain from lying, exaggeration or deceit. Third is non-stealing or asteya. Do not take anything not willingly given. Avoid fraud, theft or economic exploitation. Fourth is chastity or celibacy or brahmacharya. Be sexually faithful to one's spouse. Avoid sensual indulgence and immoral behavior. Fifth, non-possessiveness or parigraha. Limit attachment to material possessions, practice contentment and generosity. So, what is the contemporary relevance of Jaina ethics today or Jainism today? So, Jaina ethics plays an important role in ecology, peace studies, and minimalism. It also teaches non-violence that is, influential for animal rights and ecology, and the minimalistic lifestyle teaches modern sustainability. So, Jaina principles inspire movements for peace, environmentalism, and ethical living. Though numerically small, Jainas have had an outsized impact on the moral discourse. The key similarities and differences between these 3 systems. So, Carvaka follows materialism, skepticism, and denial of afterlife. Buddhism rejects the self or the anatta theory. It emphasizes on the ethical conduct and meditation. On the other hand, Jainism has emphasis on non-violence or ahimsa, metaphysical dualism, and liberation through self-discipline. So, though each Nastic school has distinct views, they share an emphasis on personal responsibility over ritual. Charvaka focuses on material pleasure and skepticism, while Buddhism offers a path of ethical practice and meditation. Jainism, with its emphasis on non-violence and strict asceticism, emphasizes spiritual purity. With this, we come to the conclusion. So, Nastic darshans contribute to a pluralistic, rationalistic tradition in Indian philosophy. So, the Nastic darshanas offer a profound critique of the Vedic orthodoxy and provide diverse alternatives in terms of ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. Their ideas continue to resonate in contemporary thought, from secular philosophy to environmental ethics. With this, we come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you all for listening.